everyone, welcome to this edition of the Brocast, where we give you bite-sized bits of best practices to help you be a better leader and a more effective communicator. I'm your host, Jarrett Bro. Each week on the Brocast, we throw out a question for discussion. You talk about it all week long, and here at the end of the week, we provide you with some of the best observations we've seen so you can still weigh in on best practices. Our question this week is, if a reporter calls you, how long do you have to prepare and call that reporter back? So how long do you have to prepare before you call that reporter back is our discussion question. Lots of consistency here in the answers, but yet some discrepancies that you may or may not agree with. Julie, for example, says call as soon as possible, certainly before the end of the day. So do you really have that much time to wait? Gail says, first of all, if you have a business, a product, or a service, you should be prepared already, meaning constantly have your messaging ready and have your spokespeople ready. She says, secondly, call as soon as possible, because if they're on a deadline and if you want to be a part of that story, there's a good chance that reporter is calling someone else, so you want to respond before they call your competition if you want to be part of that story. Lana says she calls a reporter back as soon as she can, and she communicates what she can. She will find a spokesperson and work to meet their deadline. Good practice. Cody says you always ask the reporter about their deadline, you develop a relationship with the reporter, and you call them back with good information every darn time. If you want that relationship, be responsive every time. Tim says call right away, get the information regarding the inquiry and their response deadline. So we're seeing this constant trend of know the deadline, know the deadline, know the deadline. Tim also says it's important to be responsive and still allow yourself time to prepare. MWPR says it depends on their question. It depends on their deadline and whether or not you even want to respond to be a part of it. She says just because you get a call from a reporter doesn't mean that you have to answer the reporter. Just because you get a call doesn't mean you have to participate. Good observation there. Lee says that she agrees with that, but would add that it also depends on the company, or in her case, the client's objective, and where that company is in trying to establish themselves as a thought leader. And Alyssa says she likes to gather the details, including the reporter's deadline, but she says no need to rush around if there's ample time to prepare. So we're seeing this constant trend of know the deadline, and that is critical. The other thing we have to separate, which we didn't call out in this question because we wanted to see how you were going to respond, but it depends on whether it's a positive news story in which you are almost a third-party contributor or a subject matter expert or a business in that field, a positive story that you could be a part of, or is it a negative story specifically about your company? Certainly if it is a positive story, the reporter is calling several other people because they're going to take the first people to respond. I get calls from reporters all the time, and if I'm traveling and off teaching a class one day or managing a crisis, I don't end up in that story because I can't always get back to them in 1 hour or less. In a negative story, chances are they're going to threaten you that if you don't comment in a certain amount of time, they're going to say you didn't want to comment or that you didn't provide a response. We don't want that ever to happen. So we all agree, always know the deadline. But second, after you know the deadline, you need to take ample time to prepare your spokespeople. There are multiple ways to prepare spokespeople. First of all, at least once a year, everybody needs to go through a good, thorough media training. I mean an in-depth media training that pushes them to failure and then brings them up for success. If you're not being tough on your people in media training, it's not real media training. Stop fooling them and stop fooling yourself. Secondly, if they have that strong foundation from a once-a-year training, on the day that we need that spokesperson, we can pull that spokesperson out and then role play with them for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes, for an hour, however much time you have to prepare. Of course, this depends on whether or not the story is going to be in print, radio, TV, and by print I also mean the web. If it is a print reporter, their deadline may be a little bit longer, but as soon as you talk to them on the phone, they're going to try to extract more information. Radio, likewise, if the interview is by phone, they're trying to immediately extract more information. The TV people can't really get what they need until they get you on camera. So there is a discrepancy as to knowing which medium you're going to be dealing with. And most important, make sure you have multiple spokespeople who can respond, multiple subject matter experts who can jump in as needed. I hope this gives you food for thought, some good observations this week. I want to thank everybody who participated in the broadcast. If you didn't see your response this week, maybe you'll be in next week. For the broadcast, I'm Jarrett Breaux.